So let's say you have $10,000 you want to invest. How do you start and how do you decide which is the best way to invest this money? This is what I will talk about in this video, so hopefully you will get the answer for this question. A jazz musician called Ellis Marsalis said, "You don't know what kind of music you like what you know. In order to know what you like, you have to know everything." And this is true in the world of investing too. In order to decide which is the best investment for you, you need to know all types of investments to some extent. If we look at history, we can see that US stocks tend to outperform any other form of investment. So we can probably make the most money if we put our money in stocks. And what about real estate? Unfortunately, you cannot buy or rent a property for $10,000. So the only way to purchase one is if you get a loan. But investing with a loan is not a very smart idea because it involves unnecessary risk and you lose money on the interest. And also putting all the money into one asset is never a smart move because diversification is the only free lunch in the world of investing. But you can still invest in real estate by investing in a real estate company, or in other words, buying the stock of a real estate company. So $10,000 is not a huge amount of money, therefore the best way to invest it is by putting it in something that is liquid, has a high return, and you don't need a lot of money, so you don't need a loan for the investment. Or in one word, stocks. $10,000 is the amount that is best invested in stocks, because you can start to invest in stocks with very little money and you can add more money to your portfolio later. Now there are two strategies you can follow if you want to invest your money in stocks. First, you can invest in stocks even if you don't know anything about stocks. You can buy a package of stocks which includes almost all the important companies and you can forget that you have a stock investment. For example, the S&P 500 contains the 500 biggest companies in the United States. Companies like Apple, Tesla, Facebook, Google, Amazon, IBM, Microsoft, Nike, Starbucks or Home Depot, and many of the big companies that everyone knows. If you buy a passive index fund that follows the S&P 500, you can forget that you have a stock investment and your money will earn more money for you, because your money will be in the 500 most successful companies. So you don't have to worry about diversification or analyzing companies and picking individual stocks. In fact, it's been proven many times that the most inactive stock investors earn the most money. No joke. The other strategy you can follow is picking and investing in individual stocks. For this, you need to know how to analyze companies. Because when we invest in a stock, we buy ownership in a company. And we buy it because we expect the company to generate money. So if you don't know how to analyze the fundamentals of a company, you shouldn't buy individual stocks because that would involve high risk since you don't know what you are buying. Picking individual stocks can take a little bit more from your time, but you can potentially have higher returns with individual stocks. Keep in mind, you can combine these two strategies. You can invest most of your money in a passive index fund and buy individual companies only from a small portion of your money. And what about Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies? They are liquid, they have high returns, and you don't need a lot of money to invest in them. You can also invest in Bitcoin, of course, but you need to know the differences between stocks and crypto. When you buy a stock, you become one of the owners of a company that generates money. But when you buy Bitcoin, you buy a speculative asset that doesn't generate money, it has no real value. Another important thing is that we have 200 years of data on how stocks perform, but Bitcoin is only 12 years old, so the future for Bitcoin is still uncertain. So Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are much more unpredictable and involve much higher risk. Therefore, you shouldn't put more than a few percentages of your money into these assets. I think there is a place for crypto in everyone's portfolio, but we need to be aware that these are highly speculative assets with a high risk, so we should only put the amount of money in them that we are willing to lose. So here's how I would invest $10,000 today. I would divide the money to invest it for the next 10 months, which means I'm investing $1,000 every month. I would put 50 to 90% of the money in an S&P 500 ETF. I would put some of the money in individual stocks unless you don't know how to find cheap stocks. If you learn how to analyze stocks, then it's totally fine to invest a high percentage of your money in individual stocks to get higher returns. And I would put 1 to 5% of the money in Bitcoin or in other cryptocurrencies.